Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So, Jeremy Corbyn kicked off Labour's campaign this morning with a clear message. Don't write Labour off just yet. He told supporters in Westminster that while the mainstream media had written off the party's chances in the general election, he doesn't, quote, play by the rules, and that he expected to pull off a dramatic turnaround in the party's fortunes. He took aim at big business, warning the likes of Southern Railway, Philip Green and others that they should be, quote, worried about a future Labour government led by him. Let's just give you a flavour of what he had to say.
Labour is the party that will put the interests of the majority first, while the Tories only really care about those who already have so much. That is why we will prove the establishment experts wrong and change the direction of this election. Because the British people know that they are the true wealth creators, held back by a system rigged for the wealth extractors. Theresa May will insist that this is an election about Brexit. She will try to downplay the issues that affect people's lives every day, and instead turn the election into an ego trip about her own failing leadership and the machinations of the coming negotiations in Brussels. It is only Labour that will focus on what kind of country we want to have after Brexit. In the coming weeks, Labour will lay out our policies to unlock opportunities for every single person in this country. We will focus on giving people real control over their own lives and make sure that everyone reaps a just reward for the work they do.
That was the Labour leader this morning. Labour's Jack Dromey joins me now. Welcome to the programme. Mr Corbyn said that there's a rigged system, rigged to favour the wealth extractors. Who are the wealth extractors?
Let me give you an example in relation to the world of work from which I came, and 30 years in the world of work. It cannot be right that the percentage of profit going on wages has fallen dramatically, but the percentage of profit going on top earners has increased dramatically. Boardroom excess.
That's a global phenomenon.
I'm all in favour of rewarding success. Okay. And I've worked with some damn good chief executives in my time, but it cannot be right. And understandably, what working people resent that, and what they want is a fair share.
I understand the argument. He talked about wealthy individuals and corporations, meaning companies, as wealth extractors. Give me an example of a wealth extractor.
Philip Green, for example.
That's an individual. I understand that.
Sure. Well, except that to bring alive what he is saying, what we are saying, is you need to refer to a real example.
Right.
I've met with BHS workers who work, some of them 20 and 30 years.
No, I know.
Suddenly
they lost
they've
their
been
jobs through no fault of their own.
Robbed of their pensions.
Philip Green's an individual. He's for Labour a good example. Hold on. Mr Corbyn said Philip Green should be worried by a Labour government. Why?
Bad employers, wealth extractors who treat working people shamefully, yes, they should be.
But why? What are you going to do to them?
We will be spelling out in our manifesto the issues that will be central for us at the next stage.
Well, you're going to mention Philip Green in the manifesto?
No. What we are determined to do is to ensure that the voice of working people is properly heard on the one hand.
I understand, but why should Philip Green be worried? What do you have in store for him and the boss of Sports Direct?
Wait and see what we say in our manifesto. But we're sending, yes, we're sending an unambiguous message, which is we want good employers to succeed.
Of course.
We're not going to allow bad employers to continue to exploit workers.
But you can't tell me yet why he should be worried.
Wait for our manifesto, Andrew.
All right, well,
all will be revealed.
All right, let's look at some of Britain's big companies to find out how many wealth extractors there are around. Is Tesco a wealth extractor?
Tesco is a company that's done very well. Actually, the relationships between Tesco and its workforce and their trade union, Alstor, is a really quite good
Is it a wealth
relationship.
extractor?
Tesco has sometimes not paid enough to the people that it employs.
So it is.
Would I equate Tesco with Sir Philip Green? Not for one moment.
No, I understand that, but you can't change the British economy the way you want to simply on the basis of Philip Green, whatever it is you have in store for him. So I'm trying to get a wider feel. Is British Telecom a wealth extractor?
British Telecom sometimes leaves something to be desired.
So,
but can we
is it a wealth extractor?
But you're not getting the point, Andrew, is that our criticism, our concern on behalf of working people is those who extract wealth wrongly and at the expense of working people, and who do not treat their workforce fairly or pay them a decent living wage.
Mr. Drumley, I understand the argument. I'm trying to find out who you have in mind. I understand the argument perfectly.
I've given you a couple of examples already.
Let me ask, is British Gas a wealth extractor?
In my former experience in the world of work, I chaired what was called the TUPE Forum that brought together all of the employers, public and private. And what we used to have was good contractors complaining about being undercut by bad contractors. And what we stand for, therefore, Andrew, is an economy of fair treatment, but also fair competition.
You've said all that.
Good
I'm trying to find out who is in the crosshairs, because there's a lot hanging on this, and it would be good to know who you think is part of a rigged system that is a cosy cartel. So let me ask again, is Bill Gates a wealth extractor?
Bill Gates is a man who has made a fortune, but he is one of the most outstanding men in the world.
So is he a wealth extractor or not?
He has created wealth which has been spent well, not just on his employees, but also not just...
is he not a wealth extractor?
No, hang on, not just on technological development, but also the outstanding work that he has done as a great philanthropist throughout the world.
Right. So
Andrew,
look, I know all about Bill Gates.
You're not getting the point.
No, I am getting the point. The point is that you're not answering my question. So let me try again. It's a simple question, because Mr. Corbyn has divided the system into wealth creators and wealth extractors. And I'm asking, is Bill Gates a wealth extractor? It's a yes or no.
You're not getting the point.
I'm not getting the answer, Mr. Drummond.
No. We are in favour of the creation of wealth.
Right.
We are in favour...
So is Mr. Gates the wealth creator or the wealth extractor?
Of good employers who create wealth.
Which one is he?
What we want is an economy where you no longer get the rogues undercutting the reputable.
Is British Aerospace a wealth extractor?
Is a damn good company.
So it's not a wealth extractor?
I've worked with them over the years.
It's not a wealth extractor.
And they have created wealth on a massive basis.
Is Marks and Spencer's a wealth extractor?
Andrew, I can see what you're trying to do, but you're just missing the point. Look, let me give you this example. I remember, it wouldn't be fair to name, well, why not name it, the company ISS. This was many, many years ago, one of the biggest contractors in the world. And what they said to me was, we want to be good, we want to be better, but our problem is we operate in a competitive environment where we are undercut by the rogues. So what we want to do, therefore, is to transform the nature of the economy so that good companies create wealth and succeed, so that workers benefit as a consequence.
No, you've said that now 5
times.
And
so that rogues no longer
So other than Philip Green, in your view, who else is a wealth extractor?
We've given 2 specific examples today in terms of the steps that we take at the next stages. You'll have to wait until our manifesto.
So you can't name any more, other than 2 rather high-profile, buccaneering businessmen who've had a lot of bad publicity for things they've done.
Unashamedly, those who behave badly should be named and shamed.
Right, but you can't name any more.
And that's what we'll do in future.
Let me try one more time. Who else is a wealth extractor?
Andrew, all you've got to do is to wait for our manifesto. We've sent.
So hold on. Are you going to name the wealth extractors?
We've sent the clearest possible message about the kind of economy we should be, the kind of country we should be, which works for workers and works for good employers.
That's the 6th time you've said that, without actually answering my question. So let me try another one. Do you agree with the Shadow Chancellor that anybody earning over 70,000 a year is rich?
Well, they're not poor, are they?
Well, that's not what I asked. You believe that they're rich?
The average wage is what, £26,000, £27,000 a year? To earn 70,000 a year is to live comfortably.
Well, comfortably. MPs
yes.
earn over 70,000 a year. Are you rich?
Yeah, no, I was brought up in poverty.
I'm not talking about. We're all brought up in different circumstances. You earn over 70,000 a year. Are you rich?
I now get a very good wage.
I understand. I'm not arguing with that.
A very good wage.
But are you rich?
I don't certainly feel rich, no.
So why does the Shadow Chancellor say that the rich will be above 70,000?
The point he was trying to make...
That's the point he was trying to make.
The point he's trying to make is what kind of economy should we have where instead of doing what should be done, which is a fair deal for the great majority of Britain, you've got a government that has been systematically, particularly at the top, handing out tax breaks to the rich, the corporation tax, or a top rate of tax, all of the things that have made those with a lot of money yet more wealthy. But the great majority of ordinary people have lost out, not least because we've had the longest squeeze on real wages in a generation.
Let me ask you this. If 70,000 a year is a good salary. Understand that.
Good salary.
It's good enough for MPs. It's good enough for that. But it may not necessarily make you rich or make you feel that you're rich, particularly if you live in London and the South East, where costs are very high.
Particularly
but
housing.
If you earn 70, 80, 90,000, 100,000, at the moment your marginal rate of tax is 40%.
Yes.
These people can expect to pay a higher marginal rate of tax.
We will spell out in our manifesto our intentions in relation to tax.
Well, you must be. He says that they need to pay their fair share, he says.
Our focus...
So therefore they need to pay more tax.
Our focus is not on low and middle earners. What our focus will be on, first of all, you should pay your tax because there's still too much avoidance of tax. Secondly, if you can afford much more, then you should pay more.
So can people on 70,000 afford more, Mr.
You'll have to
Dromey?
wait for our manifesto. Yeah, but also, thirdly, what we will do is to end the scandal of tax giveaways to the wealthy, because that's exactly what this government has been doing.
I understand all that, but let me try one more time. If you are earning 70,000 a year, which could be the head of a big English department in a comprehensive, it could be a relatively senior policeman, it could be a doctor, it could be a very senior nurse with a lot of responsibility. On that, you should expect to pay a higher rate of tax.
No. And our tax plans will be They
won't. So for these people, the marginal rate is not going up.
Our tax plans will be spelt out.
Yeah, but you've just said no.
No, our tax plans will be spelt out in the manifesto.
Is it yes or no?
Our focus. And I'm not going to.
I know what your focus is. I'm just asking, is it yes or no for these? There are people watching who would like to know, and they may be prepared to do so. Head teachers, JPs, they would like to know if they're going to pay more tax.
They quite like, I suppose, you to give me the opportunity to answer the question.
You've had plenty of opportunities.
Is that the focus for us will be on tackling those who avoid paying their tax, the very top rate earners who can and should pay more, and ending the giveaways. Ending the giveaways. So, for example, what we
you're not answering my question.
No, well,
we'll have to wait, I guess, for your
until the manifesto.
But you're not going. It's a simple question, and not getting it. Let me ask you this: Neil Kinnock says that it's now more unlikely than ever that there'll be a Labour government in his lifetime. Do you agree?
I am absolutely determined that we do not return to the dark days of the 1980s, where we end up with 18 years of a Conservative winter. And I fought with Neil to rebuild the Labour Party. So do you agree or disagree with the 1980s? I am absolutely determined.
I know you're determined, but I'm not asking if you're determined. I'm asking if you agree or you disagree with him.
Neil is right to say that we've got responsibility to the British people, and the British people need a Labour government, and therefore we've got to be single-mindedly focused on rebuilding support, gaining power and changing the country for the better. A Labour Britain is always better than a Conservative Britain.
It's a very interesting and forthright answer. It just doesn't bear resemblance to the question I asked. Let me try one more thing. Mr. Corbyn said this morning that the city, he didn't use the words, but he said he was talking about the financial system, the city crashed the economy. Why, after 10 years of a Labour government, did the Labour government allow the city to crash the economy?
I think there was a global problem where governments across the globe did not sufficiently regulate the finance sector. Straight answer to a straight question.
Including the Labour government here.
Labour took a whole series of very welcome steps, interestingly opposed by George Osborne in opposition.
Let's not go through
opposed by the Tories every step of the way.
But you accept that Labour, after 10 years in power, presided over events that crashed the economy.
We took steps to try and change that. The Tories opposed all of that steps. There was then the crash.
But the economy crashed.
There was then the crash, and the appalling thing about what's happened subsequently, Andrew, is it's working people who paid the price. The longest squeeze on real wages.
Which is a point Mr Corbyn made strongly this morning. Jack Droney, thank you. I hope to see you and be more successful after the manifesto.
Look forward to it.
Thank you very much. While we were talking there, we learned that Douglas Carswell has decided not to run in this election. Remember, he defected from the Tories to UKIP. He won his seat, and he then left UKIP and became an independent, one of those seats in the East Coast in the Thames Estuary, which was strong UKIP territory. But he's not running again. Suzanne Evans, what's your reaction?
Well, my immediate reaction actually is perhaps rather strange, but I think Jack Droney could look at some of the work that Douglas Carswell has actually done on how you really break apart cartel politics and how you really tackle elites and what you really do to put more money in.
I understand, but I wasn't. I was simply asking for your reaction.
I'm surprised.
You surprised?
I'm very surprised. I always thought Douglas was somebody who was. I think he did very much enjoy his job. He was a great advocate for the people of Clacton. Whatever you think of his party political switches and changes.
Well, let me give you another surprise, or maybe it's not. He's backing the Conservative candidate.
Is he? Well, I suppose we don't know who the UKIP candidate in Clacton is yet, so I suspect that's a little bit premature.
Well, no, he knows who he's backing, but who the UKIP candidate's another matter. It never rains but it pours for UKIP at the moment, does it?
Well, it's an interesting time to be in politics, and it's a very interesting time to be in UKIP as well, but it always is.
Paul Nuttall, who's got a connection with the truth.
We'll have plenty of time to get there.
Political cartels.
We're done.
This is the man that's done the work, and your policies won't work.
Post-manifesto.
Look forward to it.
Me too.
In his first major speech of the election campaign, the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has styled himself as the anti-establishment candidate, taking on what he called a system rigged against working people. He told supporters that a Labour government elected on the 8th of June would not play by the old rules, doffing its cap to the powerful. With Theresa May promising strong leadership, our political editor Laura Koonsberg looks at their different messages and what they mean for the election.
No one's going to say they're all the same. Not in this election. And not the admirers of the Labour leader who queue round the block to hear him.
We need something different, not more of the same.
I really enjoy seeing him speak.
This is a man who should be leading the country and should be our Prime Minister because he's offering a real alternative.
The left waited a long time for a leader like Jeremy Corbyn. But will the rest of the country rush towards him? He is their star. But what about you?
The Labour Party that's standing up for working people to improve the lives of all. It's the establishment versus the people. It's our historic duty to make sure the people prevail.
In practice, that means hikes to the minimum wage, bigger benefits for carers, higher taxes for some of the biggest businesses, who he said proudly should fear him.
If I were Southern Rail, or if I were Philip Green, I'd be worried about a Labour government. I really would. If I were Mike Ashley, or the CEO of a tax-avoiding multinational corporation, I'd want to see a Tory victory. I really would. Why? Because those are the people who are monopolising the wealth that should be shared by each and every one of us in the whole country.
But it means more borrowing and spending too. Ideas that at the last election didn't do Labour many favours.
What is it that you hope to show to voters in the next 7 weeks, beyond this room, that they haven't seen in the last 2 years since you've been the party leader?
Our message is one of inclusion and social justice, and we're going to get that message out across the whole country. And I'm very confident of that.
This invited audience of loyalists leapt to their feet.
This was a classic Jeremy Corbyn speech, the kind of speech that won him the Labour leadership election. He's spelt out in sky-high letters how he'll pitch this campaign. The people versus the powerful.
He's obviously a man of principle. He's a man of integrity. We know that for a fact. Can he step up to the plate in the next level? Well, he's got 50 days now to do that.
I'm really impressed. Jeremy has always said the right thing. He just never had the opportunity.
And he's a decent man. Maybe decent people don't get elected, but he's got an allotment. He makes his own jam. Did you know that?
I did know that.
Well, there you go now.
Beyond the home crowd, in seats like Luton, will Jeremy Corbyn and his team's campaign of us and them cut through?
I'd love to see you again in power.
He hasn't got the oomph.
He's a modern socialist, and I think if given the chance, he will make changes.
I don't think he's a coherent leader, and I've voted Labour in the past. I'd never vote for him.
Inevitably, the Prime Minister claims he's not up to the job. She was on a low-key visit in marginal Enfield.
This election is about ensuring that we have strong and stable leadership in this country in the national interest. It's about strengthening our negotiating hand for Brexit, and it's about sticking to our plan for a stronger Britain, developing a more secure future for ordinary working people in this country.
Jeremy Corbyn's a happy campaigner, comfortable with his fans, but he needs millions more. A brutal election beckons. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
So Jeremy Corbyn may have characterised the election as a battle between the people and the elite, but what are the issues that our voters are actually concerned about? Our deputy political editor John Pienaar has been finding out in Norwich.
Pick a place, almost any place. A street, a market, and you'll see why this election's happening now. Ask around here in Norwich, famous for its churches, but important now for its many voters who may, just may, switch their loyalties on polling day. Theresa May wants a big mandate. Whoever wins will need one. Theresa May likes grammar schools, thinks that's the way to help bright kids get on. What do you think?
I think potentially it is a good idea, but I think it could favour children whose parents can give them more advantage to help with entrance exams.
So not so fair after all?
Potentially not.
Hospitals. Do you think our hospitals need a lot more money? Just tell me what you think.
Every time there's an election or anything, the only way to do things is to promise to get the votes, and none of the promises ever come true normally.
Jeremy Corbyn and Labour, they want to see better off people, better paid people, paying more in tax, whether it's 70,000 a year people or whoever it is. What do you think about that idea? Good idea, bad idea?
Bad idea, because you will then do what we did in the 1970s and drive all of the high taxpayers abroad.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, we're already looking at the risk of big companies going over to Europe, and I think that'll just accelerate that.
Yeah.
You know, if
I think
the
40%
income tax
tax
rates
is enough. I think when you start hitting 50, 60% tax, people will move.
We may end up, one way or another, having to pay a lot more for social care for the elderly. How do you think that's going to go down?
I'm one of them. Well, I live on a large council estate, and people there would be very angry if they had to pay a lot for care. They really would. They'd go ballistic. Perhaps we need to invite, I don't know, Solomon back to sort it out for us.
That might help. So the next government will face one hard sell after another on reform, on spending. Austerity won't end overnight, and the economy could well slow down before it picks up again. Forget the polls for a moment, no one's voted yet, but when we do, we'll hand the next PM a tougher task than any leader has faced in modern times in peacetime. The customer may not always be right, but try telling the customer that. Britain's next Prime Minister won't just want a win, she or he will need a big one, and not just for Brexit. John Pienaar, BBC News, Norwich.
Well, let's get some more on this with our political editor, Laura Kunsberg. Laura, as you suggested in your report, Jeremy Corbyn was using language that won him the Labour leadership, but this is now a general election.
It is, George, and of course it's very different. And from the moment he became the Labour leader, the doubt's not been, can Jeremy Corbyn put fire in the bellies of those on the left? It's, can he reach out to voters of all varieties and persuade them that he's up to the job of taking on number 10? And to put it diplomatically, his progress along that road has been bumpy, to say the least. But we saw today, in a kind of vintage Corbyn performance, he is going to be thumping the same tub. He's not changing for anyone. His message, loud and proud, is in his view few, the Tories are the party for the wealthy few. He wants to look after everybody else. Now, he starts this election as the real underdog. His team believe they will narrow the gap between the two parties, maybe quite sharply. But with only 7 weeks to go, this is a short campaign that's caught everyone by surprise. Time's against them.
Now, Laura, one of Jeremy Corbyn's biggest union backers is also involved in his own election fight, if you like, and there has been a development today. Just talk us through what's been happening.
Well, Len McCluskey is the boss of the biggest union, Unite, and he's one of Jeremy Corbyn's most influential backers. And many people around here believe that if Len McCluskey wasn't behind him, Jeremy Corbyn wouldn't still be in his job. A man called Gerard Coyne has been trying to oust him from the leadership. But today, out of the blue, Gerard Coyne was suspended from his job at the union, Unite. A very unexpected development, and nobody can really work out exactly what has gone on. Now, it matters because the role of the Unite boss is absolutely key to the state of the current Labour Party in this election and in terms of what happens next. The results officially aren't expected until next week, but they may well emerge tomorrow.
Laura, thank you very much. The deadline for parties in Northern Ireland to try to form a government has been extended to the end of June, beyond the forthcoming general election. Several parties at Stormont have said talks were unsustainable as they'd be campaigning against each other. Launching the Greens election campaign in Bristol, co-leader Caroline Lucas said her party would stand up for equality and a bigger role for the state. She appealed to young people to vote Green and said they'd been betrayed over tuition fees, a lack of affordable housing and inaction on climate change.
Jeremy Corbyn has come out fighting on day 3 of the pre-election campaign with a fiercely anti-establishment speech promising to put power and wealth back into the hands of the people. He told a room full of enthusiastic supporters that Labour would overturn that rigged system, which he said was set up to favour the ruling elite. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, has our first report tonight.
The next Prime Minister of the UK, Jeremy Corbyn.
Jeremy Corbyn's first big speech of the campaign. He cast himself as fighting for the ordinary folk against a conspiracy of the rich and powerful.
Much of the media and the establishment are saying this election is a foregone conclusion. They think there are rules in politics which, if you don't follow by doffing your cap to the powerful people, accepting that things can't really change, then you can't win. But of course, they do not want us to win, because when we win, it is the people, not the powerful, who win. If I were Southern Rail, or if I were Philip Green, I'd be worried about a Labour government. I really would. If I were Mike Ashley, or the CEO of a tax-avoiding multinational corporation, I'd want to see a Tory victory. I really would. Why? Because those are the people who are monopolising the wealth that should be shared by each and every one of us in the whole country.
He had this response to a reporter's question about opinion polls that suggest he's leading Labour to a crushing defeat.
You very helpfully mentioned the opinion polls, and I'm really grateful to you for that. It was really kind of you, and I'm really pleased about that. All I can say is, in 2015, almost exactly 2 years ago, I was given 200 to 1 as an outside chance.
That, of course, was in a vote of Labour Party members. And Theresa May, visiting a radar factory in the Labour-held marginal Enfield North, believes she has the pulse of the wider electorate.
This election is about ensuring that we have strong and stable leadership in this country in the national interest. It's about strengthening our negotiating hand for Brexit.
Theresa May's focus was Brexit. She wants to own the Brexit vote from last year's referendum in the same way that the SNP came to own huge chunks of the ex-Labour voters and others who voted for Scottish independence in that referendum. Jeremy Corbyn largely ignored Brexit, although he did set a hair running for part of today by refusing to rule out a second referendum on EU membership.
What we saw from Jeremy Corbyn this morning was his refusal to rule out the possibility of a second referendum over Brexit. That's wrong.
Insiders say it was John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, who was trying to keep the second referendum option open, worried that Labour Remain voters didn't have enough incentive to stick with the party. Hours later, the leadership emphatically ruled out a second referendum.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
The Green Party launched their campaign with their own bid for unhappy Remain voters.
We've got a government here that's listened to UKIP, and UKIP has said jump and the government has said how high. We are the antidote to UKIP.
Jeremy Corbyn today talked of bosses who leech off workers who bust their guts. He's reprising Labour's last election campaign, championing the people against establishment forces, but the fighting talk has been ratcheted up.
Well, many Labour MPs who are seeking to defend their seats in the forthcoming election are famously less than enthusiastic about Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. But some of them, particularly in traditional Labour strongholds in the north of England, have a second problem. They campaigned in favour of Britain remaining in the EU, while the majority of their constituents voted to leave. Our political correspondent Michael Crick reports from Bolton.
Thank you. Last night, Theresa May came to this parish hall in Lancashire.
Thank you for that great northwestern welcome.
Starting her campaign in Bolton North East, a seat Labour kept by almost 4,500 votes 2 years ago.
It's a choice between strong and stable leadership under the Conservatives or weak and unstable coalition of chaos led by Jeremy Corbyn.
Party leaders in elections tell us a lot about their strategy by the places they go to. 2 years ago, David Cameron began in Chippenham, a Lib Dem seat at the start of the Tories' highly successful campaign to wipe out the Liberal Democrats in the west of England. And by coming to Bolton North East yesterday, Theresa May was putting Labour on notice that they intend to do to Jeremy Corbyn's party what they did to Nick Clegg's in 2015. This statue in Bolton town centre to a past Conservative mayor is a reminder the Tories were once strong in working class mill towns like this. This afternoon we dropped in on the Bolton Scrabble Club. How did May score? And Corbyn and Nuttall and Farron in a borough which voted 58% Brexit.
So what did you all think when suddenly on Tuesday Theresa May announced this election?
Very clever of you.
A very astute move for the Conservative Party, not necessarily for the country.
Not for the country, just for her. Yeah,
I thought, not again. I'm sick of voting.
Jeremy Corbyn has to be at a big disadvantage because she comes across as a more powerful leader.
Whereas Theresa May?
Very, very small. She could come out in a bin bag for me and I think she would still be strong. I don't want her to come out in a body bag, just a bin bag.
I'll be voting the same way as I've voted every time, that's Labour.
And you'd be happy to see Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister?
Well, Jeremy Corbyn, I think his heart's in the right place. He just needs to be more of a leader.
What about Paul Nuttall? Have you? He's the leader of UKIP.
Is he? Didn't know that.
He sort of he repeats the things that Farage has said, but he's not got that presence.
On Corbyn, even this local bigwig struggles to sell him as PM.
But do you see him as a Prime Minister? You yourself?
He's my Labour leader and I'm going to support him, and I think people can grow into jobs. So, and I think in the Labour Party, you know...
It's not much of an endorsement, is it?
I want a Labour Prime Minister, and if winning this election and Jeremy Corbyn's the Prime Minister, I will support him.
But if the Tories do take Bolton North East, the 5% swing it would take could threaten at least 40 of Labour's other seats too.
Well, some more intriguing news tonight. The challenger for the leadership of the Unite Union, Gerard Coyne, has been suspended from his existing post pending an investigation into what are being described as certain issues. Well, let's go live now to Michael Crick, who joins us from Bolton. Michael, what do you know?
Well, this suspension of Gerard Coyne couldn't come at a more extraordinary time. The voting closed in the leadership ballot after several weeks. Only yesterday, they haven't even started counting the votes yet. But it's still not clear why Mr Coyne exactly has been suspended. It was a hugely acrimonious campaign, which many people saw really as another attempt to topple Jeremy Corbyn by proxy, as it were, with Mr McCluskey being a great supporter of Mr Corbyn and Gerard Coyne being a great critic. And during the course of the campaign, Len McCluskey accused Gerard Coyne of lies, smears and innuendos, threatened legal action against his campaign newspaper and accused Mr Coyne of consorting with Labour MPs from the West Midlands, where he is the regional organiser, in attempts to, at a conspiracy really, against Jeremy Corbyn. Now, so it's looking like the actual ballot, where we'll get the results sometime next week, probably Len McCluskey is going to win that election again, and that Mr Coyne's attempt to topple him has failed. So it could well be that not only has he failed to get the top job, but he could end up losing his existing job as well.
Thanks, Michael.
Joining us now, Labour's Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade, Barry Gardiner, and the co-leader of the Green Party, Caroline Lucas. Just a quick one on Unite, which is, after all, a core element of Labour's support structure. What do you make of what's going on?
I've only just heard about it. I think this is the internal affairs of the union. Clearly, the election is now all in. The votes have to be counted. But what this is, I don't know. Why he should have been suspended, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, let's turn instead now to Mr Corbyn's speech. Establishment versus the people. Are you a member of the establishment?
Well, I think the point that Jeremy was making...
No, I've just asked you whether you're a member of the establishment.
Yes, I don't see myself as being in politics to fight to maintain the status quo that actually acts against many people in this country.
But are you a member of the establishment? I'll confess, I am, but I suspect I'm slightly anti-establishment, but within it.
Yes, I think to get...
Shall we be candid? Are you a member of the establishment?
I've no idea. If you
well, let me tell you.
Okay, you tell
Because
me.
you were privately educated, in part because your parents died when you were young, but you were privately educated. You went to university at St Andrews, very posh, Cambridge, even posher, Harvard, monumentally posh. I mean, all probably doubtless down to your brains. Then, of course, you've had some time in the city. You've been 20 years an MP. That,
I think, an interview, or is this
that in anybody's...
Is this a character assassination?
But you surely can't go round talking about a struggle between the establishment and the people if we can't clarify what we're talking about.
OK, let me be very clear then in what we're talking about. What we're talking about is a structure in this country where young people today are in the gig economy, where they cannot have a contract of work, which means that from 1 week to the next, from 1 month to the next, they know how much they're going to earn, which means that when they want to start a family, they don't even have the money to be able to put down to get a deposit, which means that a mortgage is out of the question. And yet they look around them in this society and they see so much wealth and they see so much affluence and they say, I've spent so much money in my education, in going to university, I've paid for that, and actually now I don't see how I can get a grip in this society to just be an ordinary person.
Well, Caroline Lucas, could be talking for the Green Party.
That is the way in which the rules of this society are operating, big business is operating against ordinary people. Now, that's what I call the establishment. I call the establishment when the laws and the rules are stacked against those people.
You've made that clear, but I want to ask you, Caroline Lucas, you would probably identify pretty closely with what he's just said.
I would agree with all of that. I think that the tragedy is, of course, that neither Barry nor Jeremy have the whole of the Labour Party behind them, and that's the distinction with the Green Party. We are united on our views around social justice, our views around the importance of tackling inequality, and we're also united, of course, on our position on Brexit. And the big disappointment, I think, frankly, from Jeremy's Labour Party right now is that they have simply danced to the Tories' tune. That on Article 50, Barry and his colleagues voted that through unconditionally, which meant that those key issues about standing up for EU nationals, for their right to stay here, standing up for the fact of
Yes,
having
of
a
course.
meaningful vote.
We
Those
tabled
things.
amendments
Let me
against
just
that.
finish, Barry, because I listened to you. Those key important issues, Labour could not press through with their amendments because you had already given a white flag to the government saying we will agree with Article 50 come what may. I think that is an absolute shameful abrogation of real opposition, and that is where I would certainly
Well, now we're in a
accompany with you.
tight fight to try to do something that you believe in, which is, you know, possibly challenging the way in which Brexit's going to be handled. What's the point of putting up against Caroline Lucas? Why not give her a free run in Brighton?
Because we actually have different policies. We have many different policies.
So you want to see her defeated? You want to see her defeated?
Of course, I want to see a Labour candidate elected in as many constituencies in this country as possible so that we get a Labour government.
So there will be no deals anywhere? No deals anywhere?
Let me be absolutely clear. I want to see
No, that's not what I asked you. Are there going to be any deals anywhere?
Well, no, you want me to give the answer that you want me to give. I'll give the answer that I want to give.
Well, as long as it answers the question.
Yes, it does. I want to see every Labour candidate successful in the seat that they're standing, and we will be standing candidates in the seat against Caroline. That answers your question. It may not answer it in the way that you like, John, but it does.
But I can now ask Caroline Lucas, do you want trade-offs between parties?
What I want is a new politics that will address the fact that our political system is broken. And sadly, listening to Barry, I'm not upset about the issue of Brighton Pavilion. What I'm upset about is this idea that you think that Labour Party has every single answer to every single question. Politics isn't like that anymore. And I think more and more Labour MPs need to wake up to the fact that actually, if we could learn from one another and we could actually recognise the strengths that each of us can bring to the table, we would have a much better chance of beating the Tories, frankly, than the Labour Party will have on its own. You only have to have a cursory look at the polls to be pretty sure that unless we have some degree of cooperation in at least a handful of seats, then Theresa May is not only going to win the next election, she's going to win with a massive majority. And given the damage that she is doing, the damage to social policy, public services and so forth, as well as the extreme Brexit, I would have hoped that Labour could have put the national interest above narrow party interest.
Caroline Lucas and Barry Gardner, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, and Chris.
Thanks, John. Well, one more piece of breaking election news. Nigel Farage has just announced that he will not be a candidate on June the 8th. He says he wants to concentrate his time in the European Parliament, not the British one, as he believes he can have more of an impact there on the Brexit negotiations ahead.
And given that it's the European Parliament, not the British Parliament, but the European Parliament, that ultimately, at the end of this two-year process, will have the absolute right of veto, I thought to myself, sitting as a backbench MP, being called by John Bercow twice a year for PMQs, or having a chance once or twice every month to be on the front row, to be up close and personal with Jean-Claude Juncker, Donald Tusk and all the rest of them. In terms of a stage, there's no comparison. So for all of those reasons, I've decided I will not stand in this general election, but I will stand absolutely foursquare behind Paul Nuttall, behind UKIP.
He had lost 7 times before. Still to come tonight, we focus on what will be one of the big issues of the campaign, the crisis in the NHS. We'll be reporting from a South London hospital, which, like so many in the country, is facing one of its biggest challenges ever.
I mean, Brexit's not that important. We've got on about it before and we'll get on when it happens.
The health sector, really. Yeah, Brexit is already ongoing.
They should concentrate on funding the hospitals better for children.
Now, back to the election campaign. And while Theresa May wants it to be defined by Brexit, Labour is pushing for a debate that's dominated by public services. The campaign follows one of the toughest winters ever experienced by the NHS, with the funding shortfall and concerns over staff shortages and social care all playing a part. And then there are the local campaigns to keep neighbourhood health services open. Our health and social care correspondent Victoria MacDonald reports.
This is St Helier Hospital in Carshalton, Surrey, under threat of closure or of having its services downgraded. So you take a local like Sarah McGuinness, who has multiple sclerosis. Any threat to her hospital? Well, she takes it personally.
As a disabled single mum of 2 boys, the hospital's local. I can just go on my scooter with the children over to the hospital. If St Helier closed, I would have to get a taxi to St George's. It can sometimes take up to an hour in the rush hour it would make life very, very difficult.
The Conservatives may want this general election to be all about Brexit, but that's not what the other parties are thinking. In fact, Labour and the Lib Dems have already said that they want to concentrate on issues like public services, like the NHS and hospitals under threat or A&Es facing closure. They know that you ignore these at your peril, that they play out very strongly in local constituencies. And then there are also the other issues like social care and who's going to pay for our elderly and who's going to look after them. In fact, Sarah McGuinness's mother has dementia and she did struggle to find the social care she needed.
She ended up being in hospital for 7 weeks because we knew if she was discharged home how she was, that she would be back in hospital the next day.
That the state of the NHS is of public concern is reflected in the polls. One recent survey put the health service 8 points ahead of Brexit as one of the biggest issues facing Britain. Do you think Brexit's the most important issue or your local services?
Local services. Always is. I mean, Brexit's not that important.
When it comes to voting, what do you care most about?
The health sector, really. Yeah, Brexit is already ongoing, so it doesn't really, when we think about that now.
You feel like it's a done deal, Brexit's a done deal, but you're worried about the health service?
Yeah, about the health service, because I don't think there's enough money going into it.
I think they should concentrate on funding the hospitals better for children than they do.
Are you on your way to the hospital?
Yes.
So it's on your mind?
Yes, it is.
This comes off one of the hardest winters ever for the NHS, in which targets were consistently missed. A&E waiting times, patients on trolleys, cancelled operations, ambulances queuing up. And for the first time too, social care is also high on the agenda because of elderly patients trapped in hospital when they should have been at home. All parties pledged extra funding for the NHS at the last election. The Conservatives agreed to £8 billion, and yet still it reached tipping point.
I think any incoming government has got to address the issues of funding, staffing and ways of working. I can't second guess where the parties will go in that debate. And it may be that a particular issue will rise up during the election which will force the tone of the debate.
And you had a terrible evening. We've had a very distressful 24 hours. So what are you going to do?
As it has in past elections, with distraught relatives confronting politicians about cancer care or GP appointments. Manifestos are undoubtedly being rapidly written as we speak. But in Carshalton, what they want is their hospital to be saved.
Well, joining me now, Labour Shadow Health Secretary Jonathan Ashworth and the Liberal Democrat Health Spokesman Norman Lamb. We did ask to speak to the Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt or any of his junior ministers. No one was available. However, I am joined by Chris Philp, the Conservative MP for South Croydon, who has constituents who access the threatened services detailed in Victoria's report. Chris Philp, why should anyone who uses the health service vote Tory when you've led it to such crisis?
Well, I don't accept there's a crisis. Simon Stevens, the Chief Executive of the NHS, asked 2 or 3 years ago for an extra £8 billion to fund the NHS, and we voted through an extra £10 billion, of which £6 billion has been delivered already. So the health service asked for more money and we provided it. Since 2010, when the Conservatives came to office, we've hired net 10,000 more doctors and I think 11,000 more nurses.
You can throw numbers at us all you like. The facts are the facts, and people who use the health service know exactly what state it's in, and people who've got hospitals threatened with closure, like the one near your constituents, know that it's threatened. Why would anyone in your constituency who uses that hospital vote you back into power knowing you're probably going to close it down?
Well, there's no plan specifically to close St Helier Hospital, which is in the neighbouring borough, not in Croydon. Croydon University Hospital, serving Croydon, is currently having a £25 million brand new accident and emergency centre built. Purley Hospital in my constituency is now having new morning opening hours introduced. That was an £11 million new hospital built by the Conservatives. So if you look at facts rather than speculation, and I think facts are important, you know, a new A&E in Croydon University Hospital, longer opening hours at Purley, £10 billion
I'm talking about
extra
experience,
money,
Mr. Phil, and the fact that you've missed all your targets, and the fact that you've had this terrible winter crisis.
Look, the NHS is experiencing some strain, that is certainly true, because demand for the NHS is skyrocketing, partly because the population is growing by 400,000 a year, and partly because the population is ageing and older people use the NHS more heavily, and partly because new medicines and new therapies are very expensive. So the NHS is experiencing strain. Social care is experiencing strain as well, and it does need more money, there's no question about that. And in the budget, just 5 or 6 weeks ago, the Chancellor announced an extra £1.2 billion on top of the £3.5 billion for social care funding via the Better Care Fund announced already. So I accept social care needs more funding, you're quite right, and that is being delivered.
Norman Lamb, I mean, the trouble you have for the Liberal Democrats in terms of credibility is that the decline in the health service started under the coalition when you were a health minister. The King's Fund report into health under the coalition identified that very clearly. Why should people trust you again?
Well, through the coalition years, there's no doubt at all that the settlement was very tight and we were having to sort out an enormous budget deficit. But through those years, I consistently made the case for the NHS needing more funding. And I've argued the case consistently from the last general election through to now that no party, no single party has the solution to this, and that we must be prepared to work together to come up with a solution. We've put forward the case to the Prime Minister for an NHS and care convention. I've worked with Conservative MPs, with Labour MPs. This is, if we're honest about it, you know, this is the way we have to do it, because partisan politics is actually failing to come up with a solution and ultimately letting down the people of this country.
Well, if you're honest about your own experience, I mean, haven't you just admitted that in coalition you were unable to deliver what you wanted? So why should anybody vote Liberal Democrat thinking, well, it'd be good if we had more of a balance in Parliament again, maybe a bit of Liberal Democrat power in government? You won't be able to deliver.
No. Look, I made the point that we had to balance the absolute need to get an enormous deficit for £160 billion a year under control at the same time as maintaining funding. And we actually protected NHS funding throughout that period, but nonetheless it was the tightest settlement. But I've tried to be straight with you, and I said that throughout the time as Minister, I argued the case for additional funding. The Lib Dems will make the case in this election for the need for us all to be prepared to pay a bit more tax in order to ensure that our loved ones get the care when they need it. We will also argue the case for a dedicated NHS and care tax, something that I think people will find immensely attractive.
How much, and paid by who?
Well, look, if you have an independent assessment, first of all, taking it away from politicians, it's horribly misleading to make this claim that the NHS asked for £8 billion.
Well, we're about to have an election vote. You've got to tell people how much they're going to pay extra in tax.
We will set it all out. We haven't completed, you might understand, our manifesto process, and it would be wholly wrong for me to preempt that process. But what I can say to you is that we will make the case for additional taxation.
Okay.
We will set it all out, and I think actually the public are ready for politicians to be straight and honest about the need for extra money and how we will pay for it.
Jonathan Ashworth, where are you going to get your extra money for the NHS from?
Well, you'll have to wait until we publish our manifesto as well. But of course, we do know the NHS is going through the biggest financial squeeze in its history, and the consequence of that is a very, very poor impact on patients. We're not, you know, we've seen 4 million people now on waiting lists. The government has effectively abandoned the 18-week target, completely breaching the NHS constitution and breaching the absolute duty of the Secretary of State to ensure that patients are seen within 18 weeks. And as we've seen, this very, very serious winter where patients were stranded on trolleys in corridors for hours upon hours, ambulances backed up, as we did indeed heard in the package, patients are really suffering under Theresa May.
Yes, but what's your answer?
I'm afraid the NHS does
you've
need
been out
extra
for the last few
They've
months
not had the money that they asked
for,
and we will bring forward our plans.
Yeah, well, when? You've got 6 weeks.
Sorry, I missed you, I beg your pardon.
When are we going to hear your plan?
Well, we'll bring forward a manifesto. Well, we will publish the manifesto, and you know, you'll get the chance to ask me questions about the manifesto in the next couple of weeks. So these matters will just have to wait. But look, I can assure people that we will fund the NHS properly. It is crying out for more investment. We have a crisis in NHS funding. We also, by the way, have a staffing crisis in the NHS. We simply don't have the doctors and the nurses that we need. That is going to be compounded by Brexit because, bizarrely, Theresa May just refuses to give any guarantees to the thousands of EU nationals who work in our NHS, and our NHS will collapse if those people leave the United Kingdom. But we also know that we need to put patients first, which is why we will commit to ensuring that we meet the standards on cancer, on waiting times, and so on.
Well, we look forward to you telling us where you're going to get the money from. Chris Philp, Theresa May didn't even mention the words health service or the NHS when she called this election. Is she just going to try and ignore it?
No, I don't think so. Of course, we accept the NHS is a critical issue. That's why it's getting the extra £10 billion. It's why I've been campaigning locally. I mentioned Croydon Hospital, 500 yards from where I'm standing. It's been a big campaign issue for Gavin Barwell and I. So we are going to have the NHS as an important part of our campaign because it's so important to people in this country. Look, my twins were born 25 weeks prematurely 3 or 4 years ago, and my children owe the NHS their lives. So, of course, we're going to be making it an important part of this campaign. Is anything going to change? It's one of the reasons I'm in politics.
Is anything going to change about Tory policy on health?
Well, again, without wanting to repeat the other two, we're going to have to wait for the manifesto. But we do know a bit more. But we do know a bit. We do know more. Hang on, we do know a bit more about Conservative policy because we've been in government. We do know we've put in the extra £10 billion. We do know we've been successful in hiring more doctors, and we're going on a recruitment drive. We do need more doctors and nurses.
You've got fewer GPs now. There were fewer GPs at the end of last year than there were at the beginning.
Yeah, well, the number of doctors in total across the NHS is going up, but we do need to train more, and there is a massive programme to train more doctors in this country, which is quite right. It's a priority. We need to do it, and we will do it.
Norman Lamb, I'm sorry. I know you're trying to get back in there, but I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you all very much indeed. Jonathan Ashworth, Norman Lamb, and Chris Philp.